Every year after 60, your risk of losing independence rises, not because of illness, but because of accumulation. Not clutter. Accumulation. According to the National Institute on Aging, more older adults are entering assisted living not due to medical emergencies, but because their homes became too difficult to navigate, too full to maintain, or too overwhelming to face alone. Let that sink in. This isn't about hoarding. It's about how small, well-intentioned decisions, keeping extra linens, holding onto old electronics, saving gifts you never used, quietly build up until your home no longer supports your life. It blocks it. And here's what most people miss. It's not the obvious junk causing the problem. It's the useful things, the beautiful things, even the meaningful things, that simply don't serve who you are now. If you're over 60, this video will challenge you, but it may also set you free. Hit like and subscribe if you're ready to clear the path, not just through your house, but back to yourself. Eloise never thought of herself as someone who held on to too much. At 67, she had lived a thoughtful life, raised 2 daughters, played Bach and Chopin in the quiet corners of churches and schools, taught generations of children to find rhythm and patience through piano keys. After her husband passed, her days slowed, but her home remained full. Not messy, not chaotic, just full. Full of photo albums, music books, letters tied in faded ribbons, framed certificates, porcelain knickknacks, and perfectly folded linens she hadn't used in years. It wasn't until she tried to find her tax forms one afternoon that she realized something was off. She opened the hallway cabinet and instantly felt lost. 3 drawers, 3 boxes, 2 shelves. All packed. Not with trash, but with things she once loved, once needed, or once thought she might want again. It hit her, this house was no longer a home. It was a holding space for everything she used to be. She looked around. Her husband's tools still sat in the garage, untouched. Stacks of recital programs were stored in plastic bins under the guest bed. She even had old tablecloths from her mother-in-law that hadn't graced a table since the 1980s. And yet, every time she thought of letting something go, a voice whispered, "You might want this someday. What if someone else needs it? What if it's wrong to throw it away?" That voice had followed her for years. But that day, she said something back. She stood in the middle of her living room, surrounded by decades of stories and stuff, and asked out loud, "What am I really keeping all this for?" No one answered. But the silence said everything. Because in that moment, Eloise realized she was preserving a past more than she was living a present. She wasn't saving these things for her daughters, they didn't want them. She wasn't using them. And she wasn't becoming more connected by keeping them. She was stuck. What came next wasn't a dramatic overhaul. There was no trash bag montage or one-day purge. Just a quiet, honest decision to begin. Not with what was broken, but with what was no longer true. Let's begin. What I let go of first might surprise you. Item 1. Fancy china that never came out. Eloise had never dared touch the china cabinet, not really. She dusted the glass, yes. She rearranged the pieces every few years. But she had never once served a meal on the delicate porcelain her mother passed down in 1974. The set was pristine, white with pale blue edges and a silver trim so thin it shimmered when the afternoon light caught it just right. It was too nice to use. That's what she always said. The dishes were wrapped in memory. Thanksgiving dinners from her childhood. Her mother's gloved hands polishing each piece. Holiday spreads set for company that required hair to be curled and elbows off the table. They weren't just dishes, they were proof that she had come from a family that knew how to do things right. And so she kept them. But after turning 67, Eloise noticed something strange. The cabinet was still there, still full of untouchable beauty, but she wasn't hosting those holiday dinners anymore. Her daughters preferred potlucks. Her grandkids didn't know how to sit still at a formal table. And when she really thought about it, the last time anyone in her house had even looked at those plates was when she moved them to dust the shelf behind. They had become relics of someone else's era, someone else's traditions. One afternoon, as she made herself toast with blackberry jam, she stared at her mismatched ceramic plate. It had a chip on one edge and a glaze line down the middle. But she loved it. It was warm from the toaster oven and fit just right in her hands. She smiled. The china had never felt that real. So she made a decision, not impulsive, but honest. She chose 4 of her favorite pieces to keep. Not because they were valuable, but because they were hers. The rest, she boxed gently, tied in paper, and donated to a community resale shop that supports single mothers setting up first homes. Eloise said it felt like the plates had finally found a table where they'd be loved. And in their place? Empty shelves, open air, and a space she could breathe around. She didn't lose her mother's memory. She just stopped locking it behind glass. Are you keeping something just because someone gave it to you? What if honoring them meant letting it go? Share your thoughts in the comments, we're listening. Item 2. Cable TV subscription. 4 years, Eloise paid that bill like clockwork. $143.67 a month. Cable, DVR, sports package, local news, and all the extras she never asked for but somehow ended up with. She told herself it was worth it. That staying in the loop was part of staying young, connected, informed. But the truth? Most nights, the TV was just background noise. It flickered while she folded laundry. It played reruns while she made tea. Sometimes it was on just to keep her company during dinner. But she couldn't remember the last time she watched something that made her feel good. Then one Tuesday morning, her internet went out during a storm. Silence filled the house. And instead of calling the service provider in frustration, Eloise lit a candle, picked up a book she'd been meaning to read for 5 years, and let the stillness settle in. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks. Something clicked. When she looked at her cable package, she realized she was paying for 200+ channels and didn't even know what half of them were. Some content even made her anxious. News loops that repeated every hour, dramas filled with yelling, fast-talking commercials that left her mentally buzzing long after the screen went dark. She realized her home wasn't cluttered with things, it was cluttered with input. Noise. Screens. A constant stream of updates that left her exhausted and oddly alone. So she called to cancel. The agent offered her a special senior package. She declined. Instead, she picked one streaming app, calm, simple, ad-free, and made a deal with herself. No screen after 7 p.m. Within a week, her sleep deepened. Her thoughts slowed. And the house felt quieter, yes, but in a way that nourished her. She started doing something she hadn't done in a long time, listening to herself think. Eloise didn't miss cable. Not the flashing headlines. Not the pressure to stay caught up. She gained something far more valuable than programming, mental space. What's quietly overstimulating your world? Let us know in the comments, what did you remove that brought you unexpected peace? Item 3. Shoes that made her look put together. Eloise used to have a shoe cabinet in her hallway, a tall, glossy unit with 5 tidy shelves of neatly lined heels, polished boots, wedges, and dressy flats. She never wore most of them, but that wasn't the point. To her, they stood for something: readiness. Elegance. The idea that, at any moment, she could be invited somewhere special and show up looking composed and stylish. But that moment rarely came. Instead, what did come were quiet mornings, grocery runs, park walks with her granddaughter, and doctor visits that involved a lot of standing and waiting. What also came was a growing awareness that her balance wasn't what it used to be. Her knees ached more on colder days. And those pointed toe pumps? They stayed on for a maximum of 12 minutes before she quietly slipped them off. One afternoon, after nearly twisting her ankle on the way to her own mailbox, she sat down, opened the shoe cabinet, and really looked. Each pair told a story, yes, but not about now. They told stories of a younger Eloise who stood for long hours at recitals, who danced at weddings, who attended fundraisers. She loved those versions of herself. But she wasn't living those moments anymore. She was waking up in a new chapter, one where her greatest luxury wasn't elegance, it was ease. That week, she did something radical. She took every pair of shoes that pinched, rubbed, or required careful walking, and let them go. Some were donated. Some were passed on to a younger friend. And a few she simply thanked and released. In their place, she chose 3 pairs that felt like walking on air. Supportive. Stable. Padded. Stylish in a quiet way. Her favorite? A pair of slip-ons with memory foam soles and a simple navy design. Not flashy, but they made her feel grounded, free, and able to walk as far as she liked, without needing to sit down every 10 minutes. She started walking again, daily. Not to lose weight. Not for anyone else. Just to feel good. Because looking put together at this stage of life, she realized, has nothing to do with appearances. It's how your body feels carrying you through your day. What's in your closet that looks good, but makes you feel worse? We'd love to hear, what pair of shoes did you finally let go of, and what did you replace them with? Item 4. Volunteer commitments she no longer enjoyed. Eloise had always been someone people could count on. At church, she was the one who brought the casserole, on time, still warm, always homemade. At the community center, she signed up to lead holiday drives, organize bulletin boards, and fold newsletters by hand. If there was a sign-up sheet passed around, her name was already on it. But here's what no one knew. Every commitment came with a quiet sigh. Not because she didn't care, but because she was tired. Deeply, persistently tired. Her days were filled, yet she often couldn't remember what they'd been filled with. She'd come home from volunteer meetings feeling drained instead of fulfilled, anxious instead of appreciated. One night, while flipping through her planner, she counted 7 standing obligations every single week. All unpaid, all well-meaning. But not one of them sparked real joy anymore. What she felt wasn't purpose. It was pressure. And that's when it hit her. Emotional clutter doesn't always come in the form of stuff. Sometimes, it hides in your calendar, in the shape of tasks you used to love but no longer do, in weekly appointments that feel like boxes to check instead of lives to touch. She realized she had been saying yes out of guilt. Because stepping down might look selfish. Because someone had to do it. Because people had come to rely on her. But who was she relying on? So she made a decision that took more courage than any decluttering she'd done so far. She gently stepped down from 3 long-standing volunteer roles. She called each person directly, not with an excuse, but with honesty. I think it's time for someone else to carry this forward. And then something unexpected happened. Relief. A wave of it. Her chest felt lighter. Her afternoons had space. Her mornings came without that buzz of anxiety. She didn't stop giving. She just gave differently. She started mentoring her niece in writing, something personal, one-on-one, meaningful. She took a watercolor class. She began saying yes only when her heart lit up, not just when the clipboard came around. Because sometimes the most cluttered thing in your life is your schedule. Look at your calendar. Does it reflect your current joy or your past obligations? We want to know, what's one thing you stepped back from that brought surprising peace? Item 5. Old voicemails from her late husband. Eloise had never deleted a single voicemail from her husband, not since the first one he left her the week after their wedding. Over the years, they stacked up like quiet artifacts in her phone. Little reminders of everyday love. Don't forget your umbrella. I'll be home by 6. Thinking of you. Check the back porch. After he passed, those messages became sacred. She'd listen to them late at night, when the house creaked a little louder, when the bed felt too wide, when the ache pressed in unexpectedly. His voice, steady, familiar, was her bridge to a world that no longer existed. She guarded those recordings fiercely. Changed phones 3 times, always backing them up. She even bought a tiny flash drive labeled his voice and kept it in her dresser drawer. Every now and then, she'd listen to all of them, start to finish. But she realized something she didn't expect. The comfort started to blur into sadness. Instead of feeling closer, she began feeling stuck. Like she was holding on to moments frozen in amber, playing a reel she already knew by heart. One quiet afternoon, she queued up the first voicemail again. Then the next. And the next. And somewhere between the 7th and 8th, she paused. Her chest was tight, not from grief, but from longing that had nowhere left to go. It wasn't helping anymore. It was looping. So she did something that took more strength than anyone knew. She chose one. Just one message, the one he left her on their 35th anniversary. His voice was warm, a little scratchy, and he ended it by saying, "I'd marry you all over again tomorrow." She copied it to a folder on her phone labeled "Keep Forever." Then, with tears and trembling hands, she let the others go. Not because they didn't matter, but because holding on to everything was keeping her from making space for what was next. Now, when she misses him, she doesn't replay messages. She writes to him. In a plain spiral notebook, with a pen that glides. Sometimes it's a line. Sometimes a letter. It's not dramatic. It's not performative. But it's hers. It's honest. "I still talk to him," she said. "It's just a quieter conversation now." Loss doesn't live in your voicemail box. Love doesn't disappear when the messages do. What have you kept to stay connected? And how have you learned to speak in silence? Share with us in the comments. Your story may be what someone else needs to hear today. Item 6. Extra furniture just in case. Eloise used to walk sideways through parts of her own living room. Not because it was messy, but because it was full. Full of things that were technically useful, just not to her. An extra love seat pressed up against the wall, a pair of side tables with no real purpose, a heavy armchair that no one ever chose to sit in. She told herself these were for guests. For the holidays. For someday. But someday rarely came. The truth was, she hadn't hosted a dinner party since her daughter's engagement, 10 years ago. Family visits were shorter now, simpler. Her grandkids preferred takeout picnics on the floor to formal dining. And the guests she used to prepare for? Most had moved, aged, or passed on. Still, the furniture remained. Silent. Heavy. Unused. It wasn't until she tried to vacuum behind the second couch that something snapped. Her back hurt, she was sweating, and in that moment of frustration, she asked herself a question that changed everything. Why am I arranging my life around people who aren't here? That thought echoed louder than she expected. So she stopped. Not all at once, but intentionally. She looked at each piece not with the question, could someone use this? But instead, am I using it now? If the answer was no, and hadn't been for years, it was time to let it go. She kept one couch, the one she loved to nap on near the window. She donated the other to a women's shelter. The third nightstand went to a local furniture bank. The big formal dining table? Replaced by a smaller round one that made breakfast feel cozy again. And then something unexpected happened, light. Natural light pooled in corners that had been covered for years. She could stretch her arms while walking through her own space. Even her breathing changed, slower, deeper, easier. Her home no longer felt like a storage unit for other people's comfort. It finally felt like it belonged to her. Letting go of furniture isn't just about space. It's about claiming your life as it is today, not the one you're still waiting to host. What's the one piece in your home you've kept just in case? Tell us in the comments. Maybe today is the day you finally reclaim that corner. Item 7. Her desktop computer. The desktop sat in the corner like a loyal old dog. Bulky, humming, dependable in its own way. Eloise kept it dusted, kept it plugged in, even though it took nearly 5 minutes to start up. She hadn't updated the software in years, mostly because she didn't know how. Every time it blinked with a system alert, she clicked "Remind me later" and hoped for the best. Still, it felt wrong to let it go. That computer had once been her window to the world. It held decades of photos, bookmarked recipes, sheet music PDFs, even the letter her husband had typed when their youngest graduated college. Sitting down at that desk made her feel like she was doing something. It was structured. Grown up. A place for real work. But lately, the reality was different. The monitor flickered. Pages loaded slowly. The keyboard stuck. Half the time, she ended up using her phone instead. Still, she clung to the idea that the desktop made her feel capable, until one day, she tried to upload a photo to email her daughter. The screen froze. She stared. Then sighed. Then laughed, because suddenly, it wasn't sentimental, it was ridiculous. That weekend, her daughter surprised her with a sleek little tablet. Lightweight. No cords. No tower. Just a simple screen with big icons, and everything she needed with the tap of a finger. Eloise was hesitant. But within 2 days, she was swiping like a pro, sending her granddaughter pictures of her garden, FaceTiming old friends, and even playing a daily word game that made her feel sharper than she had in months. Letting go of that old desktop wasn't just about tech. It was about releasing the part of her that believed difficulty equals value. That if something's hard to use, it must be more legitimate. Not true. Simplicity, it turned out, gave her more access, more connection, more joy. And now, her corner desk holds a lamp, a journal, and a vase of fresh flowers. No fan whirring. No cords twisting. Just space to think and breathe. Did you recently upgrade or finally say goodbye to an outdated device? Tell us in the comments, what change made your daily life easier or more joyful? Your story might inspire someone else to finally make that switch. Item 8. Books she was never going to read. Eloise had always loved books, truly. The smell of them, the weight, the promise tucked inside a spine. Her shelves had followed her through every season of life. Parenting guides from the 80s, marriage devotionals, gardening encyclopedias, 3 different versions of War and Peace, and a towering stack of self-improvement titles with words like success, declutter, and vibrant living plastered across the covers. But here was the truth, most of them had never been opened. They weren't just books. They were quiet reminders of everything she meant to do. Read more. Get better. Learn French. Reorganize her kitchen using a Scandinavian method. Every time she walked past the shelf, she felt a small internal nudge, you should be doing more. It was a library of good intentions and invisible pressure. One evening, while searching for a particular photo album, she caught herself moving yet another stack of unread hardcovers to get to a drawer. That's when the thought landed, what if my bookshelves reflected who I am today, not who I thought I should be 10 years ago? She didn't hate those books. But she didn't love them either. They had become visual guilt. And it's hard to rest in a room where your shelves are constantly whispering, you haven't read me yet. So she did what she once thought unthinkable, she pulled every book off the shelves. One by one, she held them, not asking, could I read this someday? But instead, does this still speak to me now? The answer, most of the time, was no. She kept a slim collection, her favorite poetry anthology, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, and a cookbook filled with margin notes from her husband. Everything else, 4 full boxes, was donated to the local library's senior center. Now, her bookshelf doesn't judge her. It welcomes her. It holds fewer titles, but more meaning. A small reading lamp casts a soft glow over the space where clutter once lived. Her new rule? 1 book in, 1 book out. She doesn't read to keep up anymore. She reads to feel present. Have you ever held on to books that quietly made you feel behind? We'd love to hear what you let go of, and which stories you still keep close. Tell us in the comments below. Item 9. Clothes that didn't fit her lifestyle or body. Eloise once had 3 separate closets in her home, all full. Not because she shopped excessively, but because she held on. To decades of wardrobes. To every size she'd ever been. To every role she had once played. There were the tailored blazers from her teaching days, still hanging with matching skirts and silk blouses that hadn't seen daylight since she turned in her classroom keys. There were cocktail dresses for events she no longer attended, a drawer of tights she hadn't worn in 5 years, and a stack of someday jeans that mocked her every time she opened the door. She told herself the usual lines. I might need this. I'll fit back into that soon. This cost too much to give away. But deep down, she knew. These clothes didn't belong to her life anymore. They belonged to past versions of herself. Versions she respected, even missed. But not versions she wanted to squeeze back into, literally or emotionally. The turning point came one Sunday morning when she tried to find something to wear for brunch. After trying on 5 outfits that didn't fit, didn't feel right, or didn't reflect who she was now, she sat on the edge of her bed, surrounded by hangers, and said out loud, why am I making myself feel small in my own closet? That day, she gave herself permission to let go. She packed up every outfit that was rooted in guilt, nostalgia, or fantasy. If it didn't fit her body or her lifestyle, it left. She didn't toss them in frustration, she released them with intention. Some were donated to a program that helps women re-enter the workforce. Others went to a local church that provides clothing for seniors in need. What remained were clothes she actually wore, soft knits that moved with her, pants that didn't pinch, fabrics that breathed, and colors that made her feel alive. Her closet became quieter, gentler. A space that honored her body, just as it is. Now, getting dressed isn't a test. It's an act of self-respect. She no longer keeps clothes just in case. She wears what suits who she is today, a woman who values comfort, confidence, and truth over size tags and outdated images of who she used to be. Have you kept clothes hoping to become someone again? Tell us, what did you let go of that finally made space for self-acceptance? Item 10. Home decor that didn't reflect who she is now. Eloise hadn't redecorated in years, not because she didn't care, but because everything looked fine. The walls were neatly arranged with framed prints she bought on sale years ago. There were generic quotes in scripted fonts that read, "Live, laugh, love, and happiness is homemade." On her shelves, she had glossy vases and artificial plants that had collected more dust than compliments. At first, she thought nothing of it. These were the decorations everyone seemed to have. They were safe, inoffensive, tidy. But one rainy afternoon, as she sat in her armchair sipping tea, something about the room felt off. It was quiet, but not peaceful. Clean, but not personal. It felt like a hotel room, functional, but without soul. She looked around and realized something startling. There was not a single thing on the walls or shelves that reflected who she really was. Not now. Not anymore. The decor told a story, but not hers. The canvas print in the hallway was a mass-produced farmhouse scene she bought because it matched the curtains. The centerpiece on her dining table came from a store display. She hadn't even chosen the color. Even the throw pillows weren't her taste. They were gifts, and she felt too guilty to replace them. It struck her that her space had become a collage of trends, expectations, and leftovers. Nothing about it celebrated her creativity, her memories, her voice. So she changed that. She started small. The quote plaques came down first. She wrapped them gently and donated them to a local thrift shop. Then she removed every item she didn't recognize, didn't love, or wouldn't miss. The walls felt bare at first, but not for long. In their place, she hung a painting she'd done in a local watercolor class, delicate violets in a mason jar. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. On a shelf in her hallway, she framed handwritten notes from her grandchildren, crayon scribbles, silly signatures, crooked hearts. Her dining table now held a ceramic bowl she made decades ago, rediscovered in the back of a cabinet. The transformation wasn't loud. It was quiet, but powerful. Now, when Eloise walks through her home, she sees reflections of herself, not Pinterest. Her home doesn't follow a trend. It follows truth. What's on your walls that doesn't speak to you anymore? Let us know. What have you replaced with something more real, more personal, more you? When Eloise first started letting go, she expected silence, the kind that feels like something's missing. A hollow home. A lonely space. That's what the world tells us, isn't it? That if you part with too much, you'll end up with not enough. But what she discovered was something entirely different. As each item left, a shelf cleared, a drawer emptied, a commitment stepped back from, something else entered in its place. Not more stuff. Not noise. But clarity. There was suddenly room to move through her home without squeezing between things. Room to breathe without guilt pressing on her chest. Room to think without distractions pulling her in 5 directions. She could hear her own thoughts again. She could sit with herself, and it didn't feel restless, it felt rooted. Her days weren't cluttered with tasks she didn't want, or objects she didn't use, or voices from her past telling her to hold on to everything just in case. What remained was what mattered. A closet she could open with peace. A bookshelf that welcomed her instead of whispering shame. A calendar that reflected joy, not obligation. And more than anything, a quiet confidence in her own choices. Eloise said something simple one afternoon as she sat near the window, reading in the soft light. I thought I was going to miss all the things I gave up. But the only thing I miss now is the version of me who waited so long to start. She doesn't live in a minimalist house. She lives in a meaningful one. One filled with breathing room, sunlight, and the kind of stillness that feels earned, not empty. And here's the truth most don't realize until it's too late. Letting go isn't about subtraction. It's about expansion, of time, of energy, of life itself. But there's one last thing Eloise let go of. Something she never thought she'd release. And it didn't sit on a shelf or hide in a drawer. That story deserves its own video. If this made you pause, even once, hit that like button now. It tells us you're on this journey too. Subscribe for more deeply honest stories, lessons, and turning points, because life after 60 isn't about slowing down. It's about choosing how you want to move forward. And please, share this video with someone you love. Someone who's ready to stop surviving under just in case and start living in finally enough.